Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I know you will be glad that you did because we have a terrific guest speaker. She's someone very special to me, for whom I have a tremendous amount of respect, and who has created just a really wonderful training for us this afternoon. Dr. Olga Osby is co-managing partner of Clean Slate Behavioral Health Solutions. She is also an associate professor at Alcorn State University in their Department of Social Work. And I was fortunate enough to meet her several years ago. She is in Mississippi, and I did some work for her down in Mississippi. So stay with us because you are going to get so much from this presentation. I am Rita Wolfson. I am the founder of Financial Social Work, and I will tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. Let's go ahead and get started with the most commonly asked questions, along with some suggestions to help you out. In the chat box, Vonda, who is the all-around most valuable person at the Center for Financial Social Work, will pay attention and share with you information that you might need. We do not share the slides. They are proprietary, but we are recording this, and that recording will be up on the Financial Social Work website, on our Facebook page, and on our YouTube channel by next week. You can type in your questions throughout the session in the question box, and we will do our best to save time at the end to answer as many as time permits. I have told Dr. Osby that we have a great group of attendees each month who ask lots of wonderful questions. And should you have any technical issues, you would want to go to this link that Vonda will have posted in the chat box. So before beginning today, I felt we should take a moment just to center ourselves. Whenever we talk about money, a lot goes on for us emotionally, personally, physically. So though I've never done this before, I thought it would be good to just take a deep breath in and to let it out, and to repeat that one more time in this very unusual time in this country and in this world. Then I would like to share with you something very special to me, and that is our financial social work affirmation called Just for Today. I will. Just for today, I will love myself enough to face my fears, practice self-acceptance, and embrace hope. Just for today, I will silence my inner critic, speak my truth, and make peace with my past. I will give myself permission to eliminate toxic people, beliefs, and behaviors from my life. And just for today, I will prepare for a better tomorrow by making friends with my money and myself today. And that pretty much captures everything, all of our goals and hopes and dreams for the work of the Center for Financial Social Work. So it seemed to me that even though I'm anxious for you to hear all about everything our speaker has to tell you, that we needed to just spend a moment, since we're all so engaged and we're alive in this country, and the coronavirus is affecting all of us. I thought we would just spend a moment and do a poll and talk about some ways to help us cope with, let me see, am I doing this right? Okay. I thought we would just think about, you can choose more than one. And if you have other things that you are equally as concerned about, you can certainly share them in the question box, and Vonda can share them with the rest of us. About 50% of you have voted. And there is a pretty clear major concern here. I'm going to just go ahead and count this down and share the results with you. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I will close it and I will share it with you. So most of us are concerned for a loved one's health. I can certainly appreciate that. I think all of these are very realistic, unfortunately, concerns. And it's there's so many unknowns, and life just keeps changing on us. So I did a brief, I'm going to hide that, just a brief slide for us on, and we have two wonderful handouts for you. Dr. Osby has a handout with some of the major points from her presentation. And we have this help for coping with the stress of financial problems, which these tips are definitely applicable now and most times. So we'll have those two handouts for you at the end of the session. So coping with coronavirus, it's really very important to stay present, to try to avoid the what ifs and thinking about the situations that we have no control over. It's really critical to separate fact from fiction, to limit our exposure to the news, to only access legitimate information sources, to live life intentionally and proactively, to follow the current advice that's available, but to do it within reason. And I'm hoping that these tips are things that you can share with clients also, to identify any additional reasonable ways to protect yourself and your family, because we're all unique and we're all different and our situations are different. To know who is most at risk and not assume that we're all at risk and something terrible will happen to us. So it's really about striving for balance, as most of life is. Balancing our beliefs, balancing what's happening in our lives, and addressing the financial component of this. And I'm very tempted to do some type of special session on money and coronavirus. But now let's just go ahead and proceed with our presentation. With such a high and wonderful registration for today, we know there are people who aren't familiar with financial social work. So we're just going to take a very few more minutes to tell you about why we do these monthly, well, you'll figure out why we do these free monthly webinars, but we want you to know more about financial social work. And we know that no one chooses to have money problems, but sadly, most people do. The good news is that no one can or needs to know everything or the same things about money, but everyone does need to know certain things about money. So that's where we come in, financial social work. And this is our wellness model, financial wellness, because we feel that it's the relationship we have, each of us has with money and with ourselves, that drives our behavior. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next few slides. And then I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Osby. So it's our relationship with money and self that drives our financial behavior. and it's our financial behavior that determines our financial circumstances. So that's where financial behavioral change happens. And we are a behavioral model. This is what it looks like. We include financial education, motivation, validation, and support in order to achieve the hope, the help, the healing, and the wellness that comes when we are financially healthy. And that work is successful individually or in groups. It's an ongoing process. It's experiential, reflective, strengths-based, and introspective. And we have our whole person financial health model because money is complicated. It isn't just about the dollars, the cents, the debt, and the budgets. We go beyond dollars, cents, debt, and budgets to explore the fundamentals of financial well-being. And that is that psychosocial component. It's our thoughts, feelings, attitudes, and beliefs that drive our financial behavior, which is how we earn, spend, save, share, and borrow. And right here, this is absolutely the heart of financial social work. We try to help our students, our graduates, and their clients make peace with their money. And now I am so very happy to turn this over to Dr. Olga Osby. And okay, she can tell you more about herself and start her presentation.
Okay, Rita, thank you so much. And I am so excited about being here today. I can't tell you, this is such a tremendous honor and a privilege. And so I'm very happy to have been asked. Just to give you a little background about myself, I'm a graduate of Howard University. In fact, I received my undergraduate, my master's, and my doctorate degree from Howard. And then I tell everyone they kicked me out and told me there was nothing else they could do for me. And so I went out into the world. And so I've been in social work education for about the last 25 years. I've worked on some wonderful faculties from the University of Illinois, Chicago, Jackson State University, Barry University, and now I'm with the Alcorn State University Department of Social Work. I'm also co-managing partner with a behavioral health agency called Clean Health Behavioral Health Solutions. And I'm also a recent proud recipient of my certificate in financial social work. Thank you very much. And I met Rita probably around 2013, I think, Rita, at a Council on Social Work Education session where I heard Rita talk about this wonderful thing called financial social work, which in all my years in social work had not heard of. And I have been smitten with her and with financial social work ever since. So I'm somehow landed here today. Rita called me out of the blue and asked me to do this. And I was profoundly thankful and grateful for the invitation to do this. So today I'm presenting on overcoming irrational financial decision-making. And for this particular presentation, this month we're celebrating in March Social Work Month, as well as Women's History Month. And I thought this was really very significant for Rita to ask me for to be the presenter for these 2 months, because I love celebrating social workers anywhere and any way that I can, but everyone in the helping professionals as well. I know what we're all up against in terms of the clients that we work with and what we take on as helping professionals. So celebrating everybody this month in terms of this month with Social Work Month, but also looking at the contribution of women in American history as well. I think that's profoundly significant for us to do that. So This particular webinar will address a number of things. We're looking at how helping professionals can really assist low wealth clients, especially women, overcome these harmful financial behaviors and to grow more financially, emotionally, and socially resilient. And I press this concept of resiliency quite a bit with my students as well, in terms of talking about not just deficits, but the resiliency that we find in people as well, and helping them bring that aspect out. But you'll also have to forgive me because I'm also a history buff. And I was sharing with Rita that before starting this, I was a little curious about the history of both personal and consumer financial management, and found that it really goes back quite a bit in terms of our history, starting with, of course, Benjamin Franklin from the 1700s. But one of the earliest recorded dissertations on personal finance was done by a woman by the name of Hazel Kirk in 1920. Her dissertation work at the University of Chicago was established a foundation for consumer economics and family economics as well. And Hazel Kirk went on to mentor a number of young women at the University of Chicago who became pioneers in education and research, such as Margaret Reed. And Reed became a professor of social work and home economics. And this is something I didn't realize, that back in the 1920s, social work and home economics were really considered one discipline before they were divided up. And Reed also recognized as one of the pioneers in the study of consumer behavior and household financial behavior. And one of the topics that these pioneering women in this field really talked about and pushed was equal pay for equal work. And I find that significant, that from the 1920s to here we are 2020, and we're still working around this issue of equal pay for equal work. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that as helping professionals we can do around those issues later on too. So I also would be amiss if I didn't also recognize my personal hero around this as well, which is Rita. And I really wanted to make sure that I highlighted her contribution to Social Work Month and Women's History Month, because as the founder of the Center for Financial Social Work and Financial Therapy Network, her work has been so significant and so profound. And Rita, I don't think you will have any way of counting the number of families and lives that you touched by instituting this financial social work. So I just want to thank you for your work and your contribution in terms of this. And we were just talking before we started that, she could very well go on and retire and do all sorts of things, but I'm so grateful that you're still finding passion in this work, and that you're doing all that you do on a daily basis and on a monthly basis in terms of pulling these webinars together. So thank you, Rita. So I want to get started by talking about this issue of payday and what happens, because I think it's really important for us to focus in on, particularly for women who struggle with finances and their relationship with money. And I have to share this quick story about my mother. When I was a little girl, I remember my mom on paydays. And one thing she always kept saying under her breath, "Oh, I just hate paydays. I hate paydays." And I grew up thinking that, okay, we get paid, we have some money coming in, but it's a bad thing. And so that's one of the things that I think in terms of when we talk about our relationship with money and the relationship that you grow up thinking about money, what's happening in terms of particular people and our clients when it comes to that. And the reality is that for many people, payday is a source of overwhelming stress and tension. They worry about how they're going to meet their basic monthly financial obligations. They have to think about whether or not that money is going to stretch enough for them for that month to pay their rent or pay their mortgage, whether or not they will have enough money to meet their car payment. And what about gas, getting to and from work, or to and from dropping your kids off at school and then get to work and all the other things that you need to do. And the bottom line for a lot of families, if they do not have gas, they can't go to work. And if they can't go to work, they don't get paid. And so that's a real stressor for a lot of people. And then making sure that you can meet your utilities so you can keep the lights on, you can keep the water running. You know, those are all obligations, and sometimes people have to make some really hard and difficult decisions about these things. And then what happens, God forbid, that there's an unexpected emergency. And unfortunately, we're living through this right now. And I'm so glad that Rita talked about what's happening with the coronavirus, because these are real world issues that's taking place, not just in the United States, but across the world, with this unexpected health issue that's coming up right now. So it's estimated that nearly 80% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, okay? And that 43 million Americans, or 17%, are struggling with most, if not all, aspects of their financial lives. And the average American now has about $38,000 in personal debt, and that's not including their mortgage payments. And according to the Federal Reserve, 40% of Americans don't have $400 in the bank account for emergency expenses. So you can see why there's so much tension around this issue in terms of what's happening with money, and why right now, for a lot of families, they're in a crisis situation. They're facing financial stress at this moment. And so I'm going to have our first poll here. And you'll have to forgive me because I'm a little excited about this, because I've watched Rita do this time and time again. And so I'm excited that I'm finally the person who's actually doing this. So our first poll is, what percentage of Americans have stated, let me launch it. What percentage of Americans have stated that they or a family member has postponed or put off getting health care due to cost? And think about what we're going through right now in terms of people wondering if or should they go to the hospital, should they go to the doctor, you know, and then if they go, what would be the cost in terms of that? So we're about almost 50% of you are voting right now. So let's give it just another moment and see what percentage of people do you think are actually have someone who's postponed or put this off in terms of being afraid of the healthcare costs. Okay, we're almost there at 70%. Just give a couple more minutes. I mean, not minutes, seconds here. And we're revealed. Okay, we're almost there. And I'm almost certain that if the same poll taken in another week or two, it'll be even higher as well. So we're looking at where we are right at this point. Okay, so, about a minute now. Let's go ahead and close this poll. And I'll share the results. And 50% of you think that, 50% of you think that 65% have postponed. In actuality, it's 75% of Americans who know someone who's postponed or put off getting health care due to cost. That's interesting, okay? So let's hide this result and move on a little to further on, because I think we'll discover why this is such a huge issue right now. And so when we think about people who are stressed out in terms of what's happening now with their finances, and they're starting to experience this financial stress, some of the some of the side effects that they'll feel: anxiety over what's happening and what's to come. There is a sense of panic almost. If you've been in the grocery store lately, just walking down the aisle, you see that there's a lot of panic going on and a lot of panic shopping that people are doing in terms of buying items. But, you know, when you're feeling that financial stress, you're also feeling panic. There's also a good deal of depression that comes along in terms of that. People worried about do they have enough money to stretch out through the rest of their month, and then what's will happen, you know, in the coming months as well. There's a loss of sleep. Trust me, I've been there at night. Your mind just starts reeling, and these thoughts going over and over again in your mind in terms of what are you going to do, how you're going to do it, you know, how you meet your needs, what obligations you have. So that loss of sleep is real for a lot of people. And then there's that conflict in personal relationships, because when you're stressed, you end up being, you know, a little short with people sometimes. You see a lot of people having real difficulty in their personal relationships, and you may even see it in terms of work relationships as well. That may become an issue. And one of the things that we now know from some of the research is that due to financial inequality, men tend not to feel the impact of financial stress as badly as women or women of color. Okay, and according to Salary Finance, 51% of American women worry about their finances, as opposed to only 41% of men. 38% of women are financially fit versus 52% of men. That's a pretty huge disparity there. 70% of women run out of money before payday versus 50% of men. And 41% of women have less than $500 in their checking account versus 18% of men. That's a huge disparity. 40% of women have been denied a loan versus 30% of men. And 63% of women feel they don't earn enough to save money versus 51% of men. So we can see why this is very much a female or women's issue in terms of what's happening with financial stress and financial trauma, okay? And, you know, there's a real difference between feeling financially stable and feeling financially insecure. When you're financially stable, you tend to have more of a sense of security, a sense of being safe. You can, you know, be relatively sure that, you know, whatever comes your way, you know, you'll be able to handle that. Having self-confidence is another benefit of being financially stable. And also having power over your life and future. That gives you real freedom, you know, in terms of being able to move about your life and do what you need and want to do. But on the other hand, being financially insecure, this is what causes toxic stress. It causes fear and fear of the unknown. And it also causes a sense of worthlessness. So, you know, we really have to keep this in mind in terms of what's happening with our clients, but also sometimes with our coworkers as well, in terms of what's really happening with people. And when they seem to be worried, stressed out, and that this toxic stress has an impact both on our health and mental health as well. Oh, another poll time. This particular poll will get us into talking about some of the issues around trauma and PTSD. And so I wanted to just take this particular poll before we get into it. But this particular poll asks, what percentage of the population meets the criteria for financial PTSD? And I don't know if everyone's familiar with this concept of financial PTSD, but we'll get into that in just a second. So give you just a couple more seconds to give an idea of where we are in terms of the population and the criteria for people meeting the criteria for financial PTSD. Okay. Almost 70% of you have voted. Give another couple of seconds here. All right. Okay. We're almost at 80%. Once we do that, we will move on. Okay. 1, 2, 3 more seconds. Okay. All right. We're at 80%. So let's close the poll and share the results here. And very good. You know, about 56% of you said about 25% of the American public has that meet that criteria for financial PTSD. What the research is showing right now is that 20%. But you know, given when this poll was taken and what's happening today, I'm pretty sure that we probably could definitely reach that 25% in terms of people feeling that financial PTSD. So I'm anxious to get in terms of that and kind of talk about some of those issues as well. So financial trauma, and I don't know how many people are familiar with this concept of financial trauma, but financial trauma is real. It is a very real thing. It's not just a concept that's been thrown out there. There are people who definitely have experienced this. And financial trauma is experienced by those who live below, at, or just above the poverty line. And for most of us in the helping professions, um, uh, this is our client base. You know, those who are below or at or just above the poverty line. I worked for years in public housing in Washington, D.C. as um, a social worker based on those developments. And so I definitely work with people who were definitely challenged in this particular area. And so the poverty level is another source of, financial trauma. And so this is a financial situation of most of the clients that we deal with, but it's not all of the clients, just in terms of those who live below, at, or just above the poverty line. Financial trauma is also experienced by, families, particularly a lot of women who suffer from sudden significant financial loss. And this could be a sudden financial loss from a layoff or becoming suddenly unemployed. We're already starting to see layoffs due to the coronavirus crisis right now. An unexpected medical emergency can send someone into financial trauma. Unexpected household bills can also do that. Divorce is another one. And this is something that a lot of women find themselves in. When I first started out in social work, I was working with homeless families, and they used to call divorced women displaced homemakers, which I thought was an interesting term. It sounded like something from the 1950s, but basically it was women that all of a sudden found themselves without that second income coming into the household. And more often than not, most of them had children with them. And so that caused real financial trauma in terms of her being able to take care of herself and the children. Financial trauma can also result as a sudden death in a family member. I experienced this myself over this past summer. And then there's also risky or unwise spending that can also contribute to financial trauma as well. When something comes up, make an unwise move in terms of a major purchase, and immediately almost starting to regret that. Okay. And so toxic stress that comes from finances or finding yourself in financial trauma, chronic financial trauma can result in breakdown in relationships, as we discussed before, a decrease in productivity on the job. Even while people at work, they're still thinking about their finances, and that can be a major hindrance to them in terms of their productivity. It can definitely result in poor health, as we talked about the loss of sleep and becoming worried, and that toxic stress beginning to impact in terms of your health, your heart, the anxiety, all of that. And then definitely in terms of mental health problems as well. And what I'm finding a lot too, in terms of particularly with women, that there's this financial stress can also result in a great deal of shame and guilt, and feeling as though they've let down their children or that they've let down their family in some way because of finding themselves in that situation and not being able to dig their way out or dig their way out as quickly as they want to. And this is especially true for women struggling to raise children when they're financially unstable. I was talking to a coworker recently, and she was talking about seeing women who are financially stressed in stores. And you can just tell as she's trying to purchase good and having children who are crying because they want things, and the mother knowing that she can't afford it. And that causes another layer of stress for women as well, in terms of not being the provider that she would want to be. And of course, husbands and couples find themselves in this situation as well. So let's do one more poll, and this will be my last one, that has to do with millennials, okay? And this particular poll asks, what percentage of millennials are estimated to experience financial trauma? And I'm particularly curious in terms of how you may view this one, because I think millennials get a lot of bad press, but I'm very impressed with millennials. A good percentage of this population of millennials are caregivers and doing a wonderful job. A good number of them are taking care of elderly parents and grandparents. But this is a group that's experienced a great deal of financial stress. So we'll give you just another couple of seconds because we're almost at 70% of those who have voted. And we'll see if we can get up to that magical 80%. Just another second. We're almost there. Okay, 77% of you voted. And look like that's where we'll end there. Let's close the poll and show the results there. Okay, what percentage of millennials are estimated to experience financial trauma? 42% of you said 30%, and there may be quite a few millennials that's in the audience today because you're absolutely right on that. And there's also evidence that that number is even as high as 36% as well. And we'll talk about that in just a second as well, okay? So hide this particular poll. And so let's talk a little bit about the millennial population and their dealings with financial trauma. It's been found that millennials are disproportionately affected by financial trauma. If you think about this particular population group, many of them have left school with, exorbitant student loan debt. They've entered a job market that's stagnant. They've have been unable to afford health care and acquire health insurance. And so medical issues are really huge for this particular population. And due to financial stress, as a group, they've tended to really delay getting married, having children, and buying a home. And so this is a group that I think that as we're looking at and wondering what's happening with this particular population, we also have to remember that this is a group that's really experiencing financial trauma, even to a degree that maybe their parents didn't, particularly at this particular point in their lives. And so when we think about that financial trauma, we have to also really think about and talk about what is trauma and PTSD. And most people equate the development of post-traumatic stress disorder with such adverse experiences as domestic violence, sexual assault, war, natural disasters, or a car accident. All of those things can be traumatic events that happen. And PTSD may develop after any type of these particular traumatic events. And women tend to experience PTSD, differently from men. Women are more likely to have more trouble feeling emotions or to feel numb. They tend to avoid things that remind them of the trauma and feel depressed and anxious. And financial trauma or PTSD, there's quite a bit of research by this particular psychologist, Galen Buckwalter, whose research people's relationship with money, and found that people who experience a traumatic financial loss were plagued with symptoms of stress, with failure, isolation from their finances as well. And as he was conducting his research, he was terming what he was seeing as financial fear, or factor fear around money. But he later realized that a better terminology for what he was seeing and experiencing with this population was really financial PTSD. He also found that 23% of adults and 36% of millennials experience some form of financial stress at levels that really qualified them for a diagnosis of PTSD. And he also stated that when our minds are locked into this state of fear, it is impossible to face the reality of our financial status, let alone plan for the future. And if you think about this particular population, that's when most of us during their 20s and their 30s and going into their early 40s are doing a great deal of that planning for the future. And for this particular population, they've been stagnated in terms of a lot of this. But also physical, emotional, and cognitive deficits associated with PTSD. Financial PTSD causes physical, emotional, and cognitive deficits that make it impossible to cope with sudden or chronic financial loss from inadequate financial resources. And there are also physical symptoms that Buckwalter discovered with this as well, such as nervous energy, being jittery, insomnia. No, I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but we talked about the loss of sleep before. Hyperactivity, the situations that remind them of their financial problems. Getting bills in the mail, and some of us can relate to that. phone calls for debt from debt collectors is another thing that causes this hyperactivity. And shopping for essentials with not enough money or maxed out credit cards. I remember there was a joke once by comedian Chris Rock where he talks about one of the saddest things that he's seen is being behind in a grocery line with a Black woman with a credit card, because you can see her praying, with the credit card, please let it go through, please let it go through. I've been there. And so one of the reasons why it touched a nerve and was so funny for me, because I, recognize that for a lot of women, who are living paycheck to paycheck and they're living on credit card, that's a reality. That's something that actually happened. And so those symptoms are indeed associated with financial trauma as well. And then there are emotional symptoms as well from PTSD. And some of this can be seen in the inability to feel close to friends and significant others, difficulty enjoying things that were once enjoyable, in a sense that bad things are inevitable and that life will be cut short. I share with you with just listening to my mother and her friends talk about some of the things around, how much they hated paydays, what had to happen in terms of, their making all their monthly experience. And, there was also a sense of powerlessness that comes out of that. And
I think we lost
Olga?
the audio. I think we lost her audio.
We didn't create a backup for this, but I have her slides. I'm not sure if I can take it back. Olga, if you can hear us, we can't hear you. Okay, I am going to put up her slides. Give me 1 second, everybody. And okay, here's where she was. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and share her presentation with you, since I don't know what happened with her voice. Perhaps she'll join back in. All right, so post-traumatic spending disorder. For some, the trauma results in a form of post-traumatic spending disorder. It's the irrational financial decisions one makes when overwhelmed by their financial plights. While we might expect a different form or hope for a different form. Oh, Fonda, people can see my screen, right?
I can see your screen. I don't know if you can kind of make your slides a bit bigger, or are you showing the?
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
Perfect. But you'd have to advance.
I know. Okay, sorry everybody. I just have to get back there. Technology, we love it. We couldn't do this without it, but it does have some drawbacks. Okay, so the irrational financial decisions what people make when overwhelmed by their financial plight. And as Olga would tell you, this is very real. And this is the heart of her presentation. The causes of irrational financial spending behaviors: deprivation from childhood poverty and economic instability, the attempt to cope with negative feelings about self and circumstances, filling an inner void and feeling a need to fill that emptiness with things, and the need to feel in control of life and circumstances. And it goes along with poor sense of self-worth. And when I spoke about financial social work earlier in this presentation, I talked about relationship with money and relationship with self. And if you look at all of her bullet points here, this is all woven together, and it all contributes to irrational financial spending behaviors. So the triggers for financial trauma is something that sets off a memory or a flashback, which transports you back to the event of the original trauma. These are very personal, and they're different for each of us. And a trauma survivor may try to avoid situations and stimuli that would trigger a flashback, but some of them are certainly, beyond our control. Triggers can have an emotional intensity similar to that of the original trauma, and these triggers can be activated through any of the five senses: sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste. So here we come to some ways to help clients avoid financial trauma triggers. And I think this may be part of the handout that we have for you at the end of the presentation. So we want to work with clients to rethink their relationship with their money. And a lot of that, remember, was woven into the previous slide, to help them address emotions and feelings that heighten their temptations, help them learn new financial habits to reduce spending and the urge to spend, to fill that void, that it isn't a solution for anxiety or depression, and to help clients begin asking themselves the right questions before they spend. Is this a want? Is this a need? Helping them understand which is which. Will this item make me feel better about myself or make me regret having spent the money? More on avoiding financial trauma triggers. Form a support group at your agency or in the community. Help people think through new ways to handle their...
Hi, Rita.
You back?
Yes, I'm sorry. I think there's a power outage in my area.
Now that is a classic.
I'm so sorry.
It's not your fault. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, why don't you take people through the rest of these slides of yours?
Okay, I am so sorry, you all. I apologize for that. I don't know what's going on, but it looks like there is a power outage here. But I think Rita was about to go through the help clients avoid financial trauma, and it's coming back up now. These are steps that you can take in terms of helping clients avoid financial trauma and trauma triggers. And so part of what you could do is form a support group at your agency or in your community, help them think through new ways to handle their emotions, help them learn to engage in activities that would not require money, things that they can do other than that, and help them to learn how to avoid instant gratification and the urge to spend money in ways that lead to irrational financial decisions. And I'm so sorry I missed out in talking on the other slide because I wanted to just share something. I had a fantastic father who, used to tell me all the time, baby girl, you don't have to go out and buy something just because you think you need it. And in my 20s, I was thinking, when else would you go out and buy something? But basically, these are the type of things that he was trying to teach me, in terms of, not going out and just spending money because you think you need to do. Think through in terms of what is it that you're buying, and do you really need it or do you just want it? And, so it was a behavioral method and a critical thinking method that he was taking me through. And to this day, when I'm out buying something, his voice comes in my mind. I may not have to buy this because either I have something at home that's like this or will suffice, or I don't really need this. And so it's helping clients to think through those kinds of things as well. That's really helpful. The other slide that I wanted to share is around financial abuse. And I put this in because the work that I do with the Mississippi Coalition Against Domestic Violence, very important that we're looking at financial abuse, because this is something that keeps women in poverty when they're in an abusive situation and they have an abuser who's overseeing their finances and keeping them locked into poverty, and making sure that they can't leave because there's no money. And I was just in a training the other day with a police officer who was talking about the number of women he's coming across in domestic violence situations where their abuser has put a tracking device on their cell phones, so he knows when she's out spending money, and particularly without his permission, whether she's going to the grocery store or she's stopping to get something to eat, all of that without permission. And so we have to be aware of that and ask women in terms of how they're spending their money, or if there's someone else who has that influence over them as well. Okay. Now, around common poverty traps that impact women, that next slide, these are just some things that I jotted down, that knowing from the work that I've been doing with women in these situations that are so important, like being locked in jobs with low wages and little growth potential, dependence on payday lending companies. And I have to tell you, this is one of my pet peeves in terms of this, because the women I know who have gotten locked into that, it takes them forever to try to dig their way out of that hole of getting money from payday lending institutions. Being unbanked is another huge one. I think most people will be surprised how many people in this country are not banked, have no association with a banking institution, not having their money direct deposited into accounts. And Mississippi happens to be one of the largest areas that are unbanked. And then enrolling in for-profit schools with no real prospect for jobs afterwards. Domestic violence, as I just spoke about, and then the lack of health insurance as well is another biggie for them as well. And the last slide I wanted to share with y'all had to do with social and economic justice for a vulnerable population. This is where you, as a helping professional, can really start doing some advocacy around social and economic justice, particularly for vulnerable populations, around women of color. You can advocate for legislation to ensure women's economic security, both at the national and state levels. There's a huge group here in Mississippi that I'm proud of that's been lobbying the legislature year after year for around bills that will build towards economic security for women. You can participate in and promote National Equal Pay Day, which this year will come up on November 2nd in 2020. There's Black Women's Equal Pay Day, because there are issues there for African American women being paid even less than white men, white females, and then Black women. That payday activity will be centered around August 13th. And then there's Latina Equal Pay Day as well, October 29th. You can advocate for work protections for pregnant women. This is a huge issue now as well. A lot of jobs are still letting women go if they should become pregnant. So there are certain protections other than the Family Leave Act that needs to take place. Being aware of period poverty. A lot of people don't think about this, but there are 12 million women around the United States, not just around the world, but just in the United States, between the ages of 12 and 52, who live below the poverty line, and most of them lack access to sanitary pads. I dealt with this with my students at Alcorn. They'd never heard of period poverty, but they got it and understood this is something they just did not think about. And so if you're working with women in shelters, women who are incarcerated, this is a very real issue, with that population as well. And then advocate for the employment opportunities for formerly incarcerated women, bring awareness of the issue of financial abuse to girls and young women, and then advocate for the Paycheck Fairness Act that's been lingering in Congress for quite some time. So those are just some of the things that you can do around social and economic justice as well. And then lastly, thank you all so much. I do apologize. I'm embarrassed, and I'm just really hate that I had that little snag there, but look like my power's back up now. And but here's contact information for me. So I hope they will hear from some of you, and I just hope that Rita will invite me back as well. So thank you all.
Now you have to come back. So there. And I asked Olga, she had so much information. I asked her to keep very focused and get through it all. And you did a great job, Olga. Thank you so much. So I'm going to finish up, everyone, with a poll. I've never done this before to finish up, and you'll understand in a moment why I decided to do this. So here is our final poll that I am launching. So what generation do you think today has the most financial difficulties? All right, Olga set you up. You're all doing a great job. You're voting. And we still have some time for questions. We will stay with you for at least another 5 to 10 minutes answering. I assume there are questions coming in. Wait a few more seconds and close this poll and tell you, okay, I'm going to count it down and close it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Would be interesting to see and hear. Whoa, I do not know what that is. Why can I not share this poll? This is not what I wanted. Okay, we are definitely having a moment here.
But I can see the the poll results, Rita.
Oh, you can? Oh, I didn't know that. I was seeing some other things. Okay, so here's the thing. The surprising reality is that my research for next month's webinar says that every generation has financial stress and problems. And next month, we will look at financial problems from a little different perspective than Olga shared with you, with something we call chronic traumatic debt disorder. And we
not seeing your slides. I'm sorry to interrupt, Rita. We're not seeing your slides. Not seeing the next webinars that's coming up. Not seeing that slide.
You're not seeing it.
No.
Okay. What about now?
Yes.
Okay.
We see it now. Perfect.
But you had seen the results, right, from the poll?
Yes.
Okay. So we have these next 2 webinars coming up, Thursday, April 9th at 2, chronic traumatic debt disorder, and Thursday, May 7th, a behavioral framework for coping with financial stress. And finally, I will point out what is at the heart of everything at Financial Social Work, the Center for Financial Social Work, is our certification, which is self-study and self-paced. And we are proud and honored to have Dr. Osby as a graduate. And our students have 6 months to complete it. And there is an online final exam that students have 2 weeks to complete. So these slides are just running away here. If you look, we're going to get into the Q&A right now, but I want to make sure to remind everybody that there are 2 handouts that you should be able to drag right out of the handouts space in the rectangle in your upper right-hand corner. And you are on, Vonda. Do we have questions? So here is Dr. Osby's contact information if you would like to contact her. Here is a link also with some really, I thought, very good coping material from the CDC around the coronavirus. And questions, Vonda?
Well, yes, we do have a few, but I thought I would start out with a bit of encouragement for Dr. Osby. And someone said, Olga, you were great. Don't let the power outage take away your power. Smiley face.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for giving me the term and understanding of financial PTSD. It explains much from my own life and clients. So I thought I'd start out with that.
Thank you. Yes.
Someone wants to know, can you give some examples of how to help clients to avoid instant gratification and the urge to spend money?
You know, I think that's a great question because that's something that, you know, it really takes in that behavioral change model. of having the client really think about the motivation as to why they want to spend. I think what is it that they, as my father would say, what is it that you think you need, and thinking in some other ways that they can do something other than gratifying themselves with spending money. Get into another habit. Come up with a different activity, something that does not involve spending. But I think that if they, really tap into their emotions as to why they feel as though they need to spend that money, what is it that's going into that? That may go a long way in terms of delaying that gratification. So I think that those some of the things that you really have to work with the client about. And it may be something that, when they find that urge, they may need a buddy or a pal with them as well to kind of think through, okay, what is happening here with me now? Why is it that I have this urge at this moment to spend? And getting them to just take a deep breath before they click, on Home Shopping Network, or they're out and want to make an impulse buy. I think that those are things that you can work with them and talk with them through.
Okay, thank you.
Let me take a stab at that. I just want to, let me see if I can. I wanted to point out on the May 7th webinar that we have scheduled, a behavioral framework for coping with financial stress, we will be looking specifically at more proactive ways of addressing and helping people avoid spending, because that is essential if we want to proactively reduce and eliminate financial stress. But one other way, again, because I believe it's so important, as we all know, to be more proactive than reactive, is to work with clients to develop a list of low cost, no cost habits, activities, using the library, going for a walk, meeting friends in the park instead of for lunch. Those are ways of being prepared ahead of time, keeping that list where it's accessible. And also, we will be looking next month at the emotional triggers, more in depth than what Olga did today. So the next 2 months, I'll be doing the webinars, and we have expanded on Dr. Osby's work. And thank you for telling her how terrific she is. And I can never thank her enough for a lot of things, but this was such a great presentation. So that was my contribution to that question.
Thank you, Rita. Let's see. Can you speak about women who secretly spend as a means to get back at their controlling husbands? Is there a specific resource for financial abuse after divorce? Financial trauma continues by other parent. And there are a lot of questions here. How do children deal with this? And what are the effects after? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading into another question. But I'll continue. How do children deal with this, and what are the effects after being controlled by the parent with money, also consistent with providing for that child? So there's definitely some controlling issues associated with both of these questions. It sounds like they're asking for resources.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that you could probably find online some additional information around financial abuse, because I think part of what happens with people, this is such a new concept in terms of having a name for it. I think helping professionals really have to become really aware of this. And I think there is an organization called the Purple Purse that's related to domestic violence that have some resources and information out there around financial abuse and what that entails. And so you may want to look in terms of that piece as well. And for some reason, I want to say Allstate may be the sponsor behind the Purple Purse, but it's in association with domestic violence groups. And so that's one particular resource that I think you can look at. But, I think it's also important to talk with women about, their behavior when they have someone who's controlling their finances and what that means and the impact that has over their lives. And my concern, the question has to do with the impact on children, because children see what's happening in the household, and they're picking up very early in life, this issue around money and how the adults in their lives are dealing with this. And if there's someone who's controlling, as opposed to being a true partner in terms of the spending in the household, they're picking some of that up. And so those are some things that definitely have to be examined and talked through with the parents as well, and about what the children are seeing.
Well, I would just like to say that if you can still see my screen, I just looked up on our website. Sometime in the past year, we had a great webinar on economic abuse as a hidden form of domestic violence. And we also had, so if you go to financial social work and click up on the right-hand corner, you can access that recording and also helping clients escape economic abuse. I just thought I would share those resources with everybody. That's a very difficult one. That it is difficult, and it is wonderful to have support and help for those escaping the violence, for those in after a divorce, when things are very often so unequal financially and economically. It would probably be a good webinar, Dr. Osby.
I think that would be great. Yes.
Anything else, Vonda?
Well, yes. There was one up here that, and this is pretty long, but let's see if I can get through it. Do you foresee a future where these payday lenders will be placed under some type of government-related oversight to protect the innocent and or undereducated related to the damage and harm caused in the lives of people overall? Are there any current lobbying groups that you can share that are seeking to have these concerns addressed?
Rita, you want me to go first on that one?
Sure.
Well, I know certain states have addressed this issue in terms of payday loan lenders, and I believe have been outlawed in some states. I think Georgia comes to mind of having very strict regulations around payday loan lenders. Unfortunately, here in Mississippi, not so much. They have been able to really not only grow but thrive very well here, and that has to do with their lobbying efforts in state houses and on the national front as well. And so there needs to be more advocacy around this particular issue. I also think on the federal level, they've passed laws against how much they can charge, particularly people in the military. So there's some effort around that. And we also have this wonderful group here in Mississippi called Hope Credit Union that's working with individuals who have gotten caught into that poverty trap by giving them a loan to get out of to pay off their debt. But they work with them in terms of how to build their credit back up as well. And so they're doing some wonderful work here. So there are efforts around, but it's definitely something that, more attention is needed in terms of looking at what happens with these payday loan companies, and also calling out, which is something that I've seen some groups do here in Mississippi, the legislators who are backing and supporting the payday loan companies as well.
Payday lending, it is so obscene. It should be outlawed. I just pulled up here. This is from a few years ago. Actually, we had someone from North Carolina speak twice on payday lending, and North Carolina was actually in the forefront of eliminating payday lenders. But there's so much going on. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was founded to help with some of these issues, but has digressed, deteriorated into being part of the problem on most occasions and not the solution, unfortunately. But when you were speaking, Olga, I was surprised when you even said that it could take such a long time to escape from it. Basically, if you watch this recording on our website, it's nearly impossible. It is nearly impossible. They have your checking account information and they can just keep taking the money out. And when I was trying to become more knowledgeable about before the two webinars that we had done on payday lending, and maybe I need to do another one soon. There is an organization specifically, like we have different or professional organizations. There is an organization that has developed the exact brochures for the payday lenders, exactly how to target working class people, older people, the people who are more likely to take a payday loan. It is a terrible, terrible, terrible concept. But there are people, standing up to it and fighting for it and trying to make it better.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, Vonda?
Well, there are quite a few questions that have come in within the last 5 minutes, but it's about 3:15.
Are you good, Olga? You want to take a few more?
I'm good. I'm good.
Go ahead.
Okay. This one came in a little earlier. This question, yeah, so I'm seeing significant difficulty when individuals try to differentiate between needs and wants. Are you seeing this? And what recommendations do you have to address?
That's a good one in terms of helping clients distinguish between a need and a want. And, that's something that I think in terms of what we learned through the certification process of helping people really deal with that relationship with money and how they see, and classify their needs. And so it's difficult in terms of sometimes, people may confuse a need versus a want, but being able to think things through and be able to, I guess, essentially and make a determination about what is it that they really need in terms of their survival. And then if it's a want, can I afford that want? It may not be something that you can do right away, maybe later on, but making sure that you're meeting all of your essential needs at this particular point. And that may be a little difficult because sometimes when someone's depressed, when they're going through a particular hardship, that need may be filling a void in their lives. And so how do we help them get through that and see that's really what's important, not in terms of what you're necessarily spending money on, because that thing is really trying to fill a gap for you. And so I think that's where the helping professional can really help in terms of seeing what the core issue may be.
I could also see making a little exercise and just drawing a line down the middle, needs on one side, wants on the other, and putting a list of things under each one of them and asking clients to circle the ones that are needs and the ones that are wants. Again, being proactive. And part of the problem is our language today. We talk about needing a new sofa, needing a new dress for a party. These are not needs. Need
Right.
is something you need to live. You need food, you need water, you need these are needs. Wants, I want, and helping clients to say sentences and listen to and consider, do I need a new blouse when I have 5 in my closet, or more likely 15? But those are just some thoughts from me.
Thank you, Rita. Any ideas on how to respond to clients when they are interested in bankruptcy?
I don't think I've dealt with this. Rita, you have any advice on that one?
Well, I do. I suggest reading about bankruptcy. There are certain parameters that make you eligible and qualified. I happen to believe in bankruptcy because I talked about this in the certification. It was created to give people a second chance. It's legal, it's available. We need to not allow it to feel shameful. Most attorneys will give you a free half-hour meeting to talk about it. The problem is that bankruptcy laws have changed over recent years, and they're making it more difficult to file and more expensive. But I would begin by asking the client to research what is there. There are two different kinds of bankruptcy, and be able to talk about the benefits and it stays on your credit score for either 8 to 14 years or 10 years. But we want the person to be knowledgeable about what they're doing, not just guessing, oh, I heard that bankruptcy could help me. The main reason, if I remember correctly, that people file for bankruptcy is to save property, not to lose their property.